Alright peeps, so here we are back in Logic again, and the first thing for any kind of future garage drum programming and arrangement is to select the right kind of samples, and you really need to spend a lot of time doing that. I sometimes spend an entire day just selecting the right samples, because if you don't get it fixed at the beginning, getting it fixed in the post-processing will not do the job. So you have to spend a lot of time in selecting the right kind of sample that will suit your piece of music and the vibe that you're going for. So here I have a small loop, and let's just share it, and then I'm going to be breaking down on what all elements are going through it. So I have a kick, a snare, couple of closed hats and accent hats, shakers, and the unique characteristic of a drum pattern or a groove in a future garage track are the Foley recordings or the found sounds. Now, Foley recordings or found sounds are normal recordings of everyday objects that you used as a percussive elements in a piece of music. So it can be a piece of metal that you tap on it, or it can be some coins that you play with. It can be paper, plastic, anything that has that kind of a timbre and has some percussive element to it. That's called found sounds or slash polish sounds. So how I go about this is that I go around the house and I find some things which will have some kind of percussive elements, be it bright or warm, and I just record them with my smartphone. In normal circumstances, you would use a field recorder to record all of these found sounds. But if you don't own one, just go around with a smartphone. Most of the smartphones these days have an amazing microphone quality, and you can have amazing recordings. But I use a smartphone to do all of the recordings because it's pretty easy to do that way, and it has amazing quality to uh, to have a Foley recording. Once I have all of the recordings in place, what I do is that I export them in a blank project, and then I put in some EQ, some compression, and then normalize it and then export it as a WAV file. Now I'll be doing a detailed Foley recording video later on. It's gonna be too long if I can cover everything here, but I'll be doing a detailed video on how I record the Foley recording and then how I post process it so that I can bring out as a sample pack. So for instance, here I have my own sample pack, which I went around the house with my smartphone and I recorded a bunch of stuff. So this is just me saying, this is just a tap of my fingers on a table. These are some coins that I kind of played on my hands. This is a nail cutter just falling on a piece of cardboard. This is a ring. Then I have a bunch of other recordings like bells. Then I have a cooler tap. This can sound very well for a snare. Then I have a cutter that is just like a metal cutter or a wire cutter. This is a deodorant bottle. This is like a table fan click. This is a hanger. This is a microwave door. I just punched at the microwave door. This is just a simple plastic scrunch. Everyday objects. Just go around the house. You'll find a lot of stuff that you can just record, and they have percussive elements once you know how to kind of put it in a groove. And I'll show you how I do that. So now that we have all of our samples, I start building the drum pattern one element at a time. And trust me, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of patience. To this day, I am still learning a lot of new complex drum grooves, and the best way, and this is how I go about it, is to grab hold of a future garage playlist or your favorite artist and listen to the all of the songs on repeat on loop and just focus on the drum. That's the best way, in my opinion, to learn new nuances and also get inspired along the way. So the first thing that I start building with are the kick and the snares, and let's solo these out and let's just hear the kick and the snare. Just a simple groove, and you can go ahead and play with it and have some complex structure, but this is just a simple groove that I go with. Next up, we have some closed hats. And as you can see, it's pretty minimal for now because that's how I start to build the song. Is the feel that I want to go with. I want to start the drum pattern slowly and then I want to add variations later on in the track. So I start off with very simple closed hats pattern and then I add in more variations. And that's the best way to have a non-redundancy in your drum groove. Then I add in some accent hats, and these are just complementary hats that complement the closed hats. So if I zoom in here, you'll see that both the accent hats are a different sample. So that's the key of any Future Garage track. Use a mix of different samples because if you use the same kind of sample on and on, it's going to be repetitive. So let's just hear this once from the start. So now we are getting some kind of a groove, and the more you practice, you will get some kind of a groove in your mind. So you will know how to place the hats and where you would want to place some shakers or open hats or different kind of accent hats. So next up, I go with some kind of a shaker just to fill up the silence gaps and to get some kind of a groove. So now that we have a basic groove that is going on, I like to add in some accent snares. And the key of a future garage track is to have a swing feel. So you can put in some elements and percussions on the 8th or the 16th note and just shift it off the grid ever so slightly to give it that swing feel. And that's the key of any future garage track. So as you can see, even accent snares have variations in samples, and I've used a mix of different samples. I've pre-shifted it. I've used a reverse sample to give it that bounce feel over on the 4th beat. So it's all about variations, and make sure that you have enough samples to give it that variations and keep the groove far from sounding very mundane and repetitive. So once you have the drum pattern laid out and you're happy with it, start adding the Foley recordings. And trust me, it's all about trial and error. You'll be amazed at putting some Foley recording at some beat, and once you're playing, an amazing groove will pop out. But the basic things to focus on is that this is how I go about it, that I start adding some Foley recording just before the accent hats or the snare. So I kind of shift it one beat before the snare. So it kind of gives that pre-shifted feel. So as you can notice, even in the Foley that I'm using different kind of samples, and it's best to use a variations of samples so that it doesn't start sounding very irritating to the ear and you have variations at every beat. So you can go ahead and start putting some Foley just before the snare, like I said, or sometimes on the snare grid after a snare, and I start to fill in the silence gap. So over here, I felt that there was a huge silence because I didn't have any percussive elements. I didn't have any kind of hats, didn't have any kind of snares. So I kind of started adding some reverse Foley recording. So if I solo this out and let's hear it, what I meant. So as you can hear, it's kind of like a reverse Foley recording that's going into the groove. So now that you have the drum groove placed, what I do is that I start adding some kind of variations and I start adding some new elements every 4th bar. So as you can see, in the first 4 bars, it was pretty simple. I started introducing the drum groove. It was kind of building up with the track. From the fourth bar onwards, I started introducing the accent hats and the accent snares. So as you can see, I have some accent snares that was introduced on the fifth bar onwards. It went on for 4 bars. Then I started adding some new accent hats. So let's hear it. And once these 4 bars end, I start adding new elements like open hats and a second set of Foley recordings. So let's just hear it once again. So if I solo the Foley recordings, you would and play it with the kick, you'll start to hear the variations and different kind of Foleys that I use and how it kind of builds that groove. It's just about placing the Foley recordings here and there on, just pre-shifted before the snare. Just add it on the beats, on the 8th notes or the 16th notes, and just play around with it and experiment, and you'll find amazing groove that will build. So let's just hear it together and how it kind of fits in with the other elements in the drum pattern. So that's how I create the drum arrangement for a future garage track. And what I do is that now that we have some variations, I copy the same thing from the second verse, and then I start adding more elements here and there to give it that bounce feel and to give it some different character in the piece of music. Great. You have your drum arrangement set perfectly and you're happy with it, with all of the elements, the Foley recordings, the snares, the kicks, the accent hats, and everything that you need. Let's look at the post processing of the drum that I go through. So the first thing is that I get all of the routings done correctly. And what I do is that I select all of the tracks and then I send them to a drum bus, and that drum bus kind of goes to the stereo out. Let's start off with the kick. So I like to keep the kick mono, and that's what I've been telling in my earlier videos as well, that you want the kick and the bass to sit mono, dead center. And if you have a stereo sample, and most of the samples will be a stereo sample, just use a simple utility plugin and there would be an option of flipping it to a mono, and then you'll be good to go. So as you can see that I have put all of the gain plugins in all of the tracks, and this is because most of the samples will be normalized and you want them not to clip in your mix. So what I do is I kind of gain reduce it till about minus 12 dB, because you need that headroom for mixing later on. And then once you add compressors, channel EQ, it will add in some gain. Then you'll post process it and mix it and then master it. Once you're going into the mastering, it will start to clip. So you want it to kind of set between minus 10 to minus 12. I find it that setting all of the levels to minus 12 is a perfect place to begin with. The second up, I have a channel EQ, and this is just to bring out the body of the kick. And what I also do is that I cut all of these frequencies and boost the frequencies respectively that I've cut in the kick on the bass, so that you have a balance between the two and both of them kind of have a space in the mix to pop out. So I felt that somewhere about 75 hertz, it was pretty boomy and I didn't want that. So I kind of boosted at around 200 hertz because it was giving that body. So let's hear it with and without it. So once I have EQ'd the kick, I add in a compressor. to even out the dynamics and bring out that punchiness. So the threshold is about minus 17.5. Ratio is 3 to 1. Makeup gain is about 2 dB. Knee is relatively soft knee because I want a subtle compression. Attack is pretty fast. Release is slow. And apart from that, I have engaged a soft distortion on the compressor itself. It's just to add in some color. So let's hear it with and without it. So you want a couple of dBs of reduction, not a lot, because if you have like a minus 10 dB reduction, you'll start to feel uh, what I call as ducking, and it's pretty irritating to the ears. So let's move on to the snare, and the first thing is after the gain plugin is a channel EQ. So as you can notice, I cut a lot of highs in the snare because it had some frequencies in the higher end. Then I cut all of the lower frequencies because we don't need them. We want the bass and the kick to fill out that space. I increased the body somewhere around here to give it that rounded shape. Then I cut at about 40 hertz. Then I boosted again at 1000 hertz, and then I cut at around 1780. So it's a mix of subtractive and an additive EQ. So over here, as you can see, very high resonancy bits were there, and that's why I kind of cut it. And over here, I felt that the body was sounding very nice along with the groove, so I kind of boosted it. And this is how I go about it. Once you've soloed it out and done the channel EQ, hear it with the track, and you'll find that okay, you need some kind of a boost in certain frequencies, and you go back to the channel EQ again and see where you can kind of boost or cut. Next up, I add in some tal reverb, and there's just a tad bit, not a lot, modulation about 30%, 32%, and I've cut a lot of high cuts. So let's hear it with and without it. That's about it. Now, as you can see that the hat section is kind of grouped at a certain different bus. So what I do is that I kind of send all of the hat tracks to a hat effects, separate hat effects. And this is where I add in a bunch of effects. And let's go one by one. So let's just solo the hat bus and let's hear it. Oh, and by the way, I've also panned a couple of hats to the left and the right just to give it that space and the stereo image. So the first plugin that I use on the hat bus is an SSL channel by Waves. I reduce everything up till 200 hertz because we don't need them in the mix. I boost around 3 dBs at around 800 hertz. I reduced 3 dBs at around 1500 hertz because those were the parts which had some resonance and that nasty bits in the hats. Next, I boost at around 2 dBs at around 5000 hertz, and that's just to give it some air and that bright tone. So let's A/B this. So as you can see, a little bit of middle frequencies at around 800. It's coming, it's poking through the mix, and it's kind of like dead center in your ears, and you have a little bit of brightness on the higher end. Next, I add in some saturation to give it that color. Not a lot, just a tad bit. Next, I add in some compressor from HComp. This is by Waves, and the threshold is about minus 26 dB. The ratio is around 3, I guess. Yeah, 3. And that's about it, just to even out the dynamics. So next I have a creamer tape, and this is to add in that tape sound, that tape noise. Now I kind of add in some other effects, and this is pretty common in all of the Future Garage track. They use a lot of filters, flangers, chorus in the hat effect section, and you can use them in any of the percussions in the Future Garage drum arrangement. So let's hear it, how it kind of differs. And I'm going to be disabling the Kramer tape for now because it's kind of coming in the way. So as you can hear, just adding some bit of flanger kind of gives it that character, and this is pretty unique to Future Garage tracks, and for that matter any genre that you want to kind of make. But it kind of gives that character, that color, and that very uniqueness to the sound. Next up, I have a reverb to give a stereo space and that dreaminess. And then I like to tame it down with a bandpass filter. And again, this is pretty unique to a Future Garage track. You need the hi-hats to sit in the background. You don't need them to kind of jump in the mix and have that bright feel to the track. You want it mellow in the background, just gel in and weave in with the groove. And you achieve them with, like I said, flangers, chorus, phasers, and a bandpass filter. So that's the hat effects bus. Let's look at the Foleys, and not a lot is going. Again, it's just a simple reverb and filter to tame it down. So if with and without it, let's hear it. So just a simple, very subtle difference, and because a lot of samples are high pitched and you don't want them to kind of stand out, I tame it down with the bandpass filter and add in a reverb to fill up the space and give it that vibe. Apart from that, nothing. I don't use any EQ and compression because, as I mentioned earlier, I've already done a lot of EQ and compression while exporting the samples, so you don't need them. And if you need them, you can go ahead and add in some EQs and compression to mix with the drum pattern. So there you have it. That's how I create the drum pattern for a Future Garage track. Go ahead, try it out yourself. Let me know in the comments down below if this was helpful. Keep these three things in mind: focus on variations, experiment as much as you can, and give a swing feel wherever you can. So go ahead and experiment with whatever you have. Find out the various ways to record the Foley sounds and the found sounds, add in some samples, add in some drum groove, and use all of the post-processing to give that feel. And I'm pretty sure you'll have a decent sounding drum for a Future Garage track. Okay dokie guys, that about wraps it up for this video. I hope you took something from this. Do note that you don't necessarily have to have a field recorder to do any Foley recordings. Just make use of your smartphone, even I use them, and just go around your house, take some keys, bells and coins like I said, and then record and make your own drum track and drum arrangement. As always, if you like this video, consider subscribing, give me a thumbs up, hit the notification bell so that you can stay updated. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments down below and I'll be happy to get back to you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Till then, cheers.